Okay, so Bart Prince, a contemporary architect who works from New Mexico, the United States, and was trained as an architect at the Arizona University, and then he somehow came into contact with Bruce Goff, and they got along very well, and he became his assistant, and he even continued the work of Bruce Goff after Bruce Goff died in 1982. And we'll see the work that was started by Bruce Goff and continued by Bart Prince. I myself had a chance once to be in an exhibition with Bart Prince. I forgot exactly what the name of the exhibition was. His work is very, I have to tell you, Bart Prince is not popular and not fashionable in a city like New York, because New York City is seduced by the European modernism. In New York City, even Frank Lloyd Wright is not very much talked about. At Columbia University, at least, I know very well the school, and I have to tell you, no one talked about Wright. And certainly they didn't talk about Bart Prince. But Bart Prince is an architect one shouldn't ignore, although his architecture is not truly to be repeated all over the world. It's very specific and very original, but we need someone like him. This is my opinion. And also, I think we need his freedom. We need his desire for expression. And in this sense, we can learn from him. So he was born on June 24th in 1947. Is an American architect based in Albuquerque, New Mexico. He is best known for his highly organic style of architecture. Now that word highly makes all the difference between the organic architecture of Frank Lloyd Wright and his organic style of architecture. This is the man, and he looks like a modest man somehow, and but his architecture can be wild indeed, and he was described as a wild architect. So you don't have to look wild in order to build a wild, so-called wild architecture. Sometimes those who look wild are quite conventional in their in their work, while someone who is not looking wild can produce very so-called wild architecture. There is and unfortunately I don't have it. I forgot to include. There is an interview with him, actually a letter he wrote from Bart Prince, where he writes about Bruce Goff. I think it was written when Bruce Goff died in 1982, and he writes about the fact that Bruce Goff, when he was 16 years old, he wrote to both Louis Sullivan and Frank Lloyd Wright, asking them for advice about what school of architecture to study in. And both architects told him, stay away from schools of architecture. Louis Sullivan told him, it took me a lifetime, and it still takes me time and energy to forget what I learned in school. And Frank Lloyd Wright told him plainly, if you go to school, you lose Bruce Goff. That is himself. So Bruce Goff decided to listen to the great two masters, and he never went to school, and he did quite well. Surprisingly, he arrived at leading a school in Oklahoma because he was so good that he was hired, at one point to lead an architecture school. Okay, so his favorite musical composer, we are coming back to Bart Prince, is Claude Debussy. Like the French composer, Prince has eschewed traditional style, rejected norms, broken established rules, and received his fair share of criticism and acclaim in the process. So let's read again. Like Claude Debussy, he eschewed traditional style. In other words, he rejected traditional style, rejected norms, and broke rules, and received his fair share of criticism and acclaim in the process. Bravo to him. I think we need more people who have the courage to assert themselves and not to follow placidly all kinds of so-called regulations. Because really art, and I would include architecture here too, although there is a difference between what we call art and what we call architecture, but architecture at its best becomes an art. And art needs its freedom, as it is written on the wall of the Secession building in Vienna by Olbrich, to each time it's art, and to art it's freedom. If you don't have freedom, you cannot do art. So art has to fight for its freedom, and architecture has to fight for its freedom as well. And this is what someone like Bart Prince did and does. So this is what this man wrote. I don't know who he is, maybe an architecture critic. For 5 decades, architect Bart Prince has been told time and again, you can't do that. This has never given him a moment's pause. In other words, he never stopped. Many people told him, you can't do that. And I think you know this phrase yourselves. You can't do that. You can't, you can't, you can't. But he proved them wrong, and he did it. So some drawings, unfortunately, I also have to criticize something about him, or at least about his website. He displays the drawings, plans, and sections of his buildings with a white line on a black background. And to me, it's a little bit, contrived, and it's hard to read them really. But anyway, this is his peculiarity. He's not the only one who likes white line on black background, and it depends also, but on the web, and especially when the lines are thin and small, the drawings, they are really hard to read. And that's how he has them on his website. His website is not so great, but his buildings are very interesting, at least some of them. So here is a section through one of his buildings. As you can see, towards the edges, the building becomes, refuses to use any longer verticals and horizontals. Of course, he's a follower of Bruce Goff, who was also wild. But his architecture is actually different from the one by Bruce Goff. Now look at the perspectival drawing at the bottom. That's a building he proposed. You can already see that we are dealing here with an architect who was, stubbornly proposing something else on Earth, not on Mars or the moon. Now you see this kind of drawing, it's almost impossible to see, especially by someone with inadequate eyeglasses like me. When it is larger, the drawing, it is okay. But you see, it's an architecture that refuses to conform itself to predictability. And yes, you could say it is rhetorical, and it is. But we need, I think, something like this from time to time, at least as well. Another building here. So now I just show some drawings. I didn't see sketches by him, but you can see plans and sections and so on. It is an architecture of conflict. It is an architecture of tension. It is an architecture of tumultuousness. It's an architecture that shows disruptions. Not always. Like here, for example, the curves are not so unaccommodating for whatever conflict there might be there. It's more gentle by its very nature, the curved line. But he proposed this architecture, and he built this architecture before the arrival of parametric design, and all the techniques that are at our disposal these days. No one talked at that time of fluidity, but he was in essence promoting, at least to an extent, a fluid architecture. Architecture cannot reject a preoccupation with form, but it's true there are dangers because an architecture which is formalist should be avoided. But it depends if that form is lived. In other words, it is felt and at times even ardently. Then the risk of falling into formalism is reduced and maybe even deleted. But form is part of architecture. You cannot reject architecture from aesthetics. It's impossible, although some architects did it, like Hans Meyer, who was leading Bauhaus for 3 years. It's possible to do also a kind of a grade zero architecture, or an architecture that goes so far in rejecting anything having to do with aesthetics, that paradoxically, in the end, it could become almost radically aesthetical, because the opposites attract. You know very well, in the winter, if you put your hand in snow, or you touch ice, the feeling is of burning, but it's not burning, it is cold, but it's so cold that it gives you the feeling that it is burning. So, opposites attract, and they become, one transforms itself into another. So it is possible, but you have to be fanatically rejecting any kind of aestheticism, anything having to do with so-called beauty, to arrive at some kind of strangeness, aesthetical strangeness, which perhaps could have also an aesthetical quality or interest. But this is not the case with Bart Prince. As you can see already, he was exploring a visceral architecture, contorted architecture, an architecture that was Baroque in a way, and he succeeded. He built many houses like this. But it is not an architecture that is nostalgic. It is an architecture which looks forward, and at times even seems to be science fiction. This is actually a lateral view, the long view of his own house, and we are going to see it. It's more spectacular in reality than in a bidimensional drawing. He was publicized. Most major publications, architectural publications in the world, published his work, but he's not so well known as other people. Now we begin with this house from 1982. So he was, let me see if I can count. He was already 38 years old, I think. He was born in 1947, so 35 years old when he built this house in California. But what's happened here? I know what happened. I couldn't find pictures, and I planned to go back to this, and I forgot. I couldn't find pictures, but we'll see now. No, sorry. It is the same house, but it is the house it is a house he renovated for someone who loved mathematics, art, and geometry. A very nice, conjunction. And it reminds me of an equally less known Romanian who was also a diplomat. I'm talking about Matila Ghica, who wrote a very influential book on art and life and geometry. And that book was even known by Le Corbusier. And I saw a copy of that book on the shelf of Stephen Hall in New York many years ago. And that's how I learned about Matila Ghica. So I suggest to you, if you are interested, to search for his name and his work. And if you want, I have a PDF. I have a book, this book by him on the geometry of art and life in a PDF format. I can send it to you if you want. But let me read a little bit about this house. An existing residence had been on this site for nearly 50 years when the Seymours first bought it. After living there for several years, they began to notice that with each tremor or minor earthquake, a portion of the house was moving down the hill. Quite dramatic, no? When they contacted me, this is what Bart Prince wrote, they were interested in saving as much of the house as was structurally sound and replace the rest with new living areas, kitchen and master bedroom suite. The site is covered with mature trees, which were carefully retained as opposed to a Ravenna as part of the final design. The large curving glue laminated wood beams work in conjunction with a vertical and diagonal steel structure to create a large interior volume within which are suspended the various living areas. So we'll look at some pictures of the house. You can see already that Bart Prince loved and loves, a certain spatial drama. The exterior of the building is equally unconventional, maybe even more so. Who would design, interior spaces that externalize in this way these days? Not too many people. But somehow I like to think that the trees enjoyed the presence of the house in this way here. So you already plunged into the work of Bart Prince. This is a sample of Bart Prince, and we'll continue to look at similar things. Now, the house towards the exterior evoked levels of adventurousness and even discomfort, which actually the interior doesn't show at all. It's a comfortable house, but towards the outside, it does seem indeed adventurous. You already saw this section in the grouping of drawings. So here is the house. And yes, it's an opulent house. It's a house that, the owners invested in its originality. But, certain people can. And I guess it can be done. But it is an interesting house, even if it's an addition. And, it seems they didn't cut down any trees, which is remarkable. Now, I wonder, how would it feel to live in such a house? Would you get bored? I don't think so. Would you get enticed? Probably so. And as such, it is a celebration of life, no? This is what creativity does. The Architecture of Bart Prince, The Pragmatics of Place. Anyway, someone published this book about his work, and this house is on the cover of this book. Now, his own residence, and although it is said that the shoemaker doesn't know how to make or doesn't make shoes for himself, and that is true in many cases, but not in the case of Bart Prince. In fact, Bart Prince very early on built his own house and his own studio, and is still one of the most radical. And so he was not shy and timid when he built for himself. He was almost 40 years old then, 37 years old. Okay, nestled in the suburbs of Albuquerque in New Mexico are the otherworldly forms of Bart Prince's personal residence and studio. As home and workplace for the architect, the structure truly reflects Prince's main design principle that form so closely follows function. This idea leads to the relatively uncommon architecture produced by Bart Prince. Well, this is what a journalist wrote. It remains to be seen, but I think what people understand by form and even by function is debatable, because not everybody understands the very same thing. Plus, there are many who think that form itself has a function. So here is the house. Uh, what can I say? It's certainly a house which would irritate many conventional people, because there are no, white walls. There is no cube here. There is no square. It's a house which is like a big insect, but it's also, is somehow, it has elements of science fiction, so to speak, although it is very organic and indeed it belongs to the earth. He uses stone, he uses sculptures. There are sculptures all around the building. It's a building that is fantastic. No, it has this quality of being fantastic. So from the street, it appears as a seemingly random intermingling of color, shape, and texture, but each design decision reflects an inner programmatic decision. Southern facing glazing allows for passive solar benefits. Large water columns on the interior are heated throughout the day to provide hot water for the building. You can understand why such an architect and his buildings irritate, mentalities and academies and institutions and schools, because he's following his path. The interior, I don't know, is not so radical, not so dramatic, especially with this, carpet, climbing even on the bench. But towards the outside, the building is indeed provocative. I guess this is a more recent picture. So let's read a little more. A ramp leads down into the cylindrical studio space, which is set into a burnt area near the front of the building. This allows for both a measure of noise and temperature control. The roof of the structure is supported off of a central column with a fanning arrangement of structural pipes. This covering is raised off the structural concrete supports of the exterior wall to allow for a flood of overhead lighting. So this is his studio, and you are going to see next to this building a gallery that he built on top of his other. He has a few other buildings underneath it. So this is the long elevation of the building. The base. A separate yet equal entrance ramp leads to the main living space, containing an interconnected network of purposeful rooms. The two first floor levels are connected by a series of upper stories which serve as bedroom, library, and workspaces. A stone tower was added to the building in 1990, you saw it, and serves on the lower level as a library and the upper level as a drawing storage area. So the tower is not shown in this drawing. So, the building might appear wild, but if you look at the plan, there is a coherence, even a certain rationalism. It's rigorous, I would say, and easy to read, in fact. But what makes it interesting is that the building assumes a certain form of explicit dialogue with what surrounds it, that is nature, the vegetation around it, And so the building is like this conglomerate halfway between man and nature. And I think it's interesting. It's a large building, and usually he builds large buildings. Of course, he doesn't say no to ornaments, as you can see here on the right. And I suggest to you to do the same. Do not neglect ornament. You cannot have structure without ornament, because it leads into, aesthetical apathy and into a deadlock. You need also the capriciousness of ornament, whatever Adolphus might have said, who was also a hypocrite, because he used the ornaments of marble quite often, and so did Mies. Now, there are interesting things here. What are these, spikes, metallic spikes? Even here, there are interesting things, that normally you would not, in your quest for a clean architecture, you would avoid or you would not think of. And this is not the building, of course, it's the earth around the building, but you see the earth is much richer than what we usually do, we human beings, with our simplifications, with our concepts, Here we see the freedom of nature and the imperfections of, if we can call them imperfections, probably inadequately, the verity, the richness of architecture, of nature is beautiful. It doesn't matter where we look. If we allow nature to be herself, sooner or later we will face beauty and truth at the same time. Now he has this, I don't know if he did these sculptures or not, but they kind of go well with the building. This kind of zooarchaeology, or I don't know how to call it, zooarchaeology. But the building is interesting. It's like, a giant, science fiction insect. It's both biological and somehow coming to us from, I don't know, a different species or from a different time. It's a spaceship, no? It is what it is. It is a spaceship. And look how he does the fence. Why does the fence have to be only predictably with verticals and horizontals? Why can't it be this way? Well, obviously he challenged that idea too. And good to him, good for him. So you see, in the proximity of his building, he didn't do a depressing parking lot, but he allowed nature to be herself. And then he placed these abstractions of animals, which are kind of nice. So there, he surrounded himself with a man-made nature and with nature herself. And I intentionally say herself and not itself, because I think nature is a woman, and we could call her, after all, Mother Earth is a woman. So we could say she when we refer to nature. It's a good building. It is. And the other one is also by him. This is a gallery he built on top of some other buildings he had here. And but they are so different. You compare this building with this one. He even brought the sculptures, the statues, whatever you want to call them, outside of the fence, towards the sidewalk. Nice. It's a way of in a way attacking the highway with, sculptural animals. and the trees are magnificent. Of course, he didn't even think of cutting them. I suggest the same thing. Do not cut trees. They are more important than our buildings. Our buildings don't provide oxygen. The trees do, very generously, and they don't ask us to pay anything for that oxygen, without which we die. Now we look at the art gallery, which is, you saw it on the right side of his own house, sits above one of his 2 personal residences, and here it is. I think even Zaha Hadid would have been jealous, because it is an outgoing, vehement, it's an imperious advancement. It's an imperious building. You know, it shows aplomb. And it's beautiful that he thought of bringing art. I don't know if he did these sculptures or not. It doesn't really matter. What it does matter, that he brought art outside of the fence of, in other words, he didn't keep them for himself. He challenges the street and thus society with art. And that's what we should do too. Look at the formal inventiveness, you know, and there is force. This is not formalism, there is force. It's an inner energy that is transmitted to the building. And look at the unusualness of the, you know, the sculptural works that are shown, and they go well with the building, although formally the building uses a different vocabulary, so to speak, than the sculptures. Still, I think they communicate quite well. Art, architecture, they are invention, they are about creation, they are about expressing emotions, expressing thoughts, expressing desire to make, to give meaning to our lives. We cannot continue to do placid buildings, you know. No, we can't. We better not build instead of building deja vu, so-called architectures. So the home of Prince home designs look futuristic, space age, and even whimsical. He uses uncommon building materials, including cork, wine bottles, maybe he likes to drink, black steel pipes, and copper sheet metal. Interesting, no? So yes, you can incorporate in your building also unconventional materials, found objects, take things from the garbage can, from where they are discarded, from your kitchen, and include them in the anatomy of your buildings. Now we look at the work that he started with Bruce Goff. Actually, Bruce Goff started the work, but he died in 1988, and his assistant, Bart Prince, completed the work, the Pavilion for Japanese Art at the Los Angeles County Museum of Art in Los Angeles, California, from 1988. Here is a rendering of the work, but the resolution is not great. Sorry about this. And let me read a little bit about this. Designed by Bruce Goff for Joe Price initially, and I don't understand very well, for a site in Bartlesville, Oklahoma. Mr. Goff and I, this is what Bart Prince wrote, Mr. Goff and I were working together as associated architects to create this museum for Price's Japanese art collection. I understand. So this museum was built for that Joe Price, maybe one of his relatives, the same family name. At around the time of Mr. Goff's death in 1982, Joe Price had decided to build a building in Los Angeles as a pavilion addition to the Los Angeles County Museum of Art. The design was in the schematic phase at that point and was completed by me, meaning Bart Prince, to incorporate the requirements of the Los Angeles County Museum of Art and the new site. The roof structures of the galleries are suspended by cables to allow for non-load bearing translucent perimeter walls for ideal lighting conditions for the art. When asked, Joe Price said that the art is the client. So all design decisions were made based on what was best for the art. Okay, so here is the building. He didn't build too many institutional buildings. Mostly his work is about private residences, although the private residences that Bart Prince built are very large. They could easily become museums or who knows what. Sorry for the resolution of some of the pictures. Here is the building. It's not one of his most spectacular buildings, but he built it. The interior to me is a little bit dry, although he uses so-called organic forms, but because it's a monomaterial, could, I don't find a great emotion looking at this picture. The exterior is a little bit better, but still is not, you saw, if you compare this building with his own house is wilder and more dramatic and in a way truer and also, I would say, more beautiful. But I like the drawing, even if I don't understand very well what's going on here, but it's visceral, it's agitated, it's contorted, it's dramatic. More dramatic actually than the built work. Again, this monomaterial, maybe because they wanted art to bring in the otherness that, you know, was to be expected. And the building was more like a background. Maybe that's why they decided to do it in this way. I like more his houses than this particular museum, and it's not very conclusive about Bruscoff either. This building, maybe because it was not finished by him, and who knows what it would have become if Bruscoff was alive. In terms of space, it's interesting. It's just this, you know, monomaterial, which could be a little bit tiring, probably. Anyway, now we arrive at another residence from the same year, 1988, again in Albuquerque, where he resides in New Mexico, and it's a very different building from the building he built. And it's not a bad building, I would say. It has, although the chromatic palette maybe is a little bit mellow, but otherwise, in terms of the handling of the volumes, the plan, you know, and also the inclusion of this, you know, apparently ruined wall is interesting. You know, so maybe these are some touches of, you know, a slight postmodernism, but he's not using, you know, the paraphernalia of postmodernism, you know, columns from Greece or whatever, and all that nonsense that the historicists used to great disappointment. So an interesting building, I would say. He often, or sometimes he extends the structure outside the limits of the house in order to, as he put it, to tie the building together with the sky, or in this case with the horizon or whatever. It's the aspiration, it's the desire to connect the building beyond its physical limits with whatever is in that beyond. Now another house 1 year later, 1989, was also received an addition in 1996. This one in California. This one is very interesting. Is truly has elements of somehow Rudolf Steiner and Imre Makovich. There is something. I mean, he went here far, especially in some parts of the building. Its organicism is quite quite dramatic. It's almost like a solidified lava. I mean, even here, look what's going on here, compared to this building. This is drama, no? And it's unexpected. You don't quite know what's going on here. And look at this roof. It's in a way it's amazing, no? It refuses it drastically refuses the Cartesian paradigm, with a flat terrace, flat terrace and flat terrace and flat terrace. Why? Actually our modern flat terraces are more boring, and they don't even function as good as the vegetal roofing of the old peasants of Romania, that you can see their houses in the museum in Bucharest. But this is a modern roof, but it's a roof which refuses to be flat. And instead it has waves, and it's heavy, but it's also luxuriously soft in a way, and it almost invites being caressed. It's a very interesting roofing. I don't know what kind of a material he used for it, but the whole building is in a way out of this world almost. It's culture. In this sense, I'm probably Brâncu should have loved it, because turn off the microphone. Thank you. Please be kind and turn off the microphone. So, Brâncu said that architecture is inhabited sculpture. Well, in a way, that's what we look at here. And both outside and inside, it's a tornado. Even the pieces of furniture, maybe they are a little bit too slick for my sense of aesthetics, but I would have liked them to be a little rougher, a little raw. But all in all, the intentions are good to create an environment that is, engaging. Although not everything is very engaging. And this is a problem also in the deconstructivist work. You do a building which is exploded or imploded, which is animated by a vortex of energies. But when it comes to stairs, and not to speak about escalators, you are brought down to earth, so to speak. I mean, even here, the stair is the stair. You have the steps, regularly distanced one from the other, and, the handrail is approximately at 85, 90 centimeters. This is a little bit disappointing, how to make a stair which doesn't look like a stair, and how to, even with escalator, I think new kinds of escalators are needed. Escalators which are not stubbornly declaring themselves, we are escalators. I mean, look at what's going on here. And then the stair, yes, he played a little bit with the handrail, but all in all, the stair is too explicitly and too predictably a stair in a building which otherwise tries to and succeeds to an extent to kind of confuse you. Like here, if the handrail was not here, kind of predictably designed in this way, this part is out of this world. It's, science fiction, could be derived from a movie by George Lucas or whoever. But the stair, I guess you have to betray to betray the comfort you are looking at, and you maybe skip a you know, one element from the stair, or break the, you know, the handrail, or do something to connect with what is here, because what is here has a different spirit than what I see here. But the building is good, it's interesting, and especially this part here is, I think, is beautiful, and you know, unexpected, like everything that is truly beautiful. 1991, another residence in Idaho near the Sun Valley, a big organism called House for who? The Harry Whiting residence. Um, These are large houses, of course. These are not little houses for proletarians. No, they are not communist houses, you know, unless we talk about a certain segment of what the communist society couldn't avoid to have. Um, anyway, it's another interesting building from Bart Prince. Isolated though, you know, and you wonder, you know, you make this drama, and this drama is placed in a land where almost no one is there, with your exception, and maybe some animals. And so there is I see a certain possible sadness here, you know. It's like performing the Ninth Symphony, you know, in a desert, you know. There is no one to hear it. And I don't know. Although we see a person here, maybe she is an architecture student, or she lives in this house. But the way the house becomes landscape, and the landscape becomes the house, is quite good. This one actually, I don't think it belongs to this house. It has similarities. We'll arrive at that house. This one, the Nob Hill residence in Ohio, 1989. I couldn't find, I found a few pictures, but struggling a lot. For some reason, I'm not happy with what I found, but you'll see. Again, this is, sorry, this does not belong. I think it doesn't belong to this house. I had troubles with this house. Maybe, I don't know. I couldn't find it on his website, and I even wonder, is it by him? Sometimes, as you know, on the internet, there is information which is conflictual, if not downright wrong. This one also not. This might be part of that house, but the previous image not. Sorry, and I meant to erase it. About that house, I'm not sure exactly which picture belongs truly to that house, but the others were properly identified. 1991, the Judy and Stuart Spence residence in California. So let me read a little bit. It was commissioned. I mean, this couple commissioned Bart Prince to design an extension to their 1920s Spanish-style house. They wanted to provide exhibition space for their rapidly expanding art collection, plus entertaining spaces and the swimming pool. He gave them this luminous addition wrapped around the conventional stucco house like a Nautilus shell, enclosing an ancient sycamore while filtering light into the interior volumes. The pictures are a little bit slick for my taste, but that's what I found, and not very relevant pictures, unfortunately. Sometimes it's hard to get all the documentation that is needed. A little bit too so-called clean. I think both for the taste of Bart Prince and for those lovers of viscerality, and I am one of them. And this is not a mono material, but it's a two material. It's a dual material. And I think he is best when he uses many materials and even unconventional materials. But this is not the case here. Now, I don't think Bart Prince would have been immensely happy with this building, nor not with what I see here. Anyway, it happens. Sometimes you make buildings which are not totally maybe representing you at your best or at your worst. 1993, George Grado and Barbie Benton residence in Aspen, Colorado. 1993, built on a beautiful 40-acre site above Aspen. The Grados wanted to build one structure that would provide space for their family, guests, entertaining on a large scale, office and working space, gymnasium and exercise pools. My God, this is a big house. The structure steps down the hill in cantilever sections, which allow for views from all of the spaces in the house. Part of the program from the beginning was for me, says Bart Prince, to design the spaces within which Barbie Benton could work out her ideas for interior design to complement the way they wanted to live in the house. And again, maybe it's just the pictures, whoever took them. I think some of these pictures show a level of slickness which is a little bit different from what we saw in his own house, and in a way, in contradiction with the very essence of his philosophy, to build a house that was raw, that was dramatic, that was cultural, that was even impure. And here we see a level of slickness. You know, look at that bourgeois, huge, grand piano there. And then, yes, this building could feature in a James Bond movie. It's true, but it's not raw in that sense in which his own house was and is. The plan is interesting, although it is mostly symmetrical, but the building, maybe from afar is interesting. It's true. And then these are pictures from his own website. His website is not so, the pictures are small and only a few, but forget the pictures and forget I mean, no, we can't forget the pictures because, you know, a PowerPoint presentation needs the pictures. But I think the building is still interesting, especially when we'll be hit by the elements, and then when ivy will begin to climb on it and so on. I think it needs some of that. Otherwise, I don't know. I'm sure that this sofa is very, very comfortable, but almost embarrassingly so, with those pillows inflated as they are, uh, inviting you desperately to lay on them. You know, it's oh, these seductive pillows. Everything is so cushy and you know. I don't know. I mean, comfort at this level turns me off. But obviously, it doesn't turn off the clients, and they paid for those inflated pillows. But you know, the architecture is has abrasive elements. You know, all those these parts of the house which emerge with a certain virility from the building. 2005, again, New Mexico, this Dan Scherger and Susan Kohlberg residence. Here we have the big stones approaching the house. We see again the structural beams advancing towards the sky in an attempt, which I read, he declared he did so in order to connect the house with the sky. I don't know. I still like the most until now his own house, and that house with that viscerally Baroque roofing. I wonder how Bart Prince would build within the city. And I do have here a project for collective housing, but not great pictures. You know, it's one thing to build in such a landscape, and it's another thing to build, you know, on a street in a so-called regular city. I also wonder how he would have built in Europe if he had the occasion. I think he could have done it. You know, if Victor Horta did it, I'm sure Bart Prince could have done it too. Even a townhouse, you know, with strict limitations to the left and to the right. Another house, 1993, also in California. See, this house is designed to be used initially as a weekend and holiday retreat, but to eventually become the full-time residence for the Heights after their retirement. The house responds to the dramatic site with a continuous undulating roof, which provides a buffer to the wind on one side while opening to the ocean views on the other. Guest quarters are located over the garage at one end of the house, with a master suite under the same roof, but at the other end for privacy separation. You remember the previous picture, it belongs to this house. Now you wonder, you know, even a big residence, does it need such a, you know, giant staircase to lead into the house? You know, it's this could work for an opera building, you know, for a public building. But it's true, his houses are big. And I mean, just look at this garage, you know, for two cars. It's big. Anyway, on the other hand, Villa Capra by Palladio, did it need its giant entrances on four sides of the building? You know, they were homages in a way to the cardinal points, to the sky, to heaven, to cosmos, and not so much for, you know, little human concerns or sufficiencies. No. The building is nice, interesting from the outside because of this roof, which prolongs the landscape into the body of the house. The sections are interesting too. Now, another house from 1993, also in Albuquerque, New Mexico, the Cigar House. This is how he said he, you know, both in amusement and in some kind of a sadness, most of his houses received nicknames because of the unusual shapes or forms that he uses, and people invented nicknames for his buildings. And this is called the Cigar House. And it was built for a professor in a college, and you know, obviously a professor who was earning well because it's a big house. And but you know, people have all kinds of sources of income, so maybe not just from teaching. Um, I still like nature more than even the buildings, some of the buildings by Bart Prince. And I'm glad that he allowed the landscape designer, but I think he was the landscape designer too. I read about one of the projects. His name was, you know, connected with the landscape design, and here I imagine too. And I like the fact that he, you know, he doesn't use, you know, he doesn't trim nature, and it shows clearly affection for the wilder side of nature. The building is not so wild. He did better in some other places, but still has a certain level of drama. Um, it's a big building. What can we say? And here we see the cigar, this long, elongated piece of architecture. You see it even better from above. It's not the most modest building in the world. It's not, but that's probably also because the client was not one of the most modest professors or teachers in the world. It's okay. Um, Funny that little round table there in the proximity of that giant round window. Okay, another house, 1998, also in New Mexico. And, this one says Robert Borden and Kathleen Wigner wanted to live in a cabin between quotation marks on the Chemez River for their permanent home. The building is lifted on a superstructure of telephone poles as a protection from flooding and to make the most of views in all directions. The ground level is thus open, allowing for views through the river, through to the river at that level, as well as covered exterior spaces for parking and picnics. Living areas and studio spaces are on the first level above ground, with bedrooms on the level above. The roof provides a large deck with 360-degree views, jacuzzi, and outdoor sleeping spaces. I like this view of the building. I didn't see the most, I was not lucky perhaps to find the best pictures with this building, but this one I like. The resolution could have been better, but I like this view. Now, if this is called a cabin, uh, then my conception about what a cabin is forced to reorient itself. It's a large building, of course. He doesn't build small buildings now. Bart Prince probably would never build Le Cabanon by Le Corbusier. What is funny, you wouldn't expect this symmetrical building, would you? And it's unexpected from this plan to get the building that we just saw. Now, another one from 2004 in Glorieta, also in New Mexico. This one also has some interesting parts. It reminds me a little bit of the work of an interesting architectural firm in the States, Patcow Architects. The house refuses to be totally stable and sure of itself, and it breaks away a little bit towards some form of instability. And this I like. And it shows at the interior, this variety of spaces and the fact that the house assumes a certain level of fragility. I think that's good, although it's a big house. Again, fragmentation has this effect of bringing not only variety, but this sense of fragility, which could make the house more able to communicate in non-arrogant ways with surroundings, nature, or who knows what. And I thought of this when I prepared this material. You know, the architect provides the background, and then the owners, you know, they bring in, artworks, you know, things that belong to them, and all of a sudden the ambiance becomes richer and more complex. And I think that's good when art and life meet. Uh, the the meeting could be fruitful. I'm not so sure, I mean, you know, about these long curved or not curved sofas, built-in sofas that he seems to like. They are a little bit, you know, airport aesthetics in a way. But anyway, also interesting is that he doesn't give up on masonry. You know, that there are walls here, masonry walls. And this is something, for example, that the deconstructivists don't do. You know, the deconstructivists very often they don't use, you know, natural materials or, you know, stones or, other kinds of materials. There are no masonry walls very often in there are sometimes, but often they are not present in the works of the deconstructivists. Maybe this was also a scar in a way. No, but it's not a scar. I think it's something positive, you know, that he seems to like not just an organic architecture, but sometimes also organic materials, you know, wood, stone, and things that belong or come from the earth. A portrait in concrete, wood, and steel. A Bart Prince designed dream house in Glorieta is this house that you just saw. And we go to the next one from 1999, Columbus, Ohio. This one, I only hope, Bart Prince didn't get too involved with the aesthetics of Las Vegas. It has a certain influence here that could become problematic. I couldn't find the best pictures, but you'll see some pictures of this house. He on Wikipedia, his activity stopped in 2005, I think, so 16 years ago. It's hard for me to believe he didn't continue to build afterwards. Um, Maybe that Wikipedia article is not up to date. It's very possible. Bruce Goff, he also brings water very close to the house, if not inside the house as well. And you see, there is a problem. Architecture benefits from a wild imagination, if we are to call it so. But still, I think architecture must not fall into a a fairy tale kind of aesthetics, because the reality of life is sometimes fantastic, it's true, but it's not just that. So the dualities of life should be assumed. And when you make something that is very fairy tale, you risk of advancing, some kind of Las Vegas, melodrama, and that I think would be problematic. Now, a giant building from 2002 in New Mexico, again, sadly alone. It's a huge building, and it's nice. It's well made, but it's I don't know. Let me read a little about this. So the Fu residence was conceived as a series of incidents located along an elongated portal raised high off the desert floor. I had seen pictures of this house and did not expect to find something I liked when I visited it. That's what the author of this text wrote. In pictures, the building appears crisp and white against the desert sky and feels alien to the landscape. However, the longer I spent walking around this building, the more it seemed to make sense. The building is not white, as the picture suggests, but a cream color, and the exterior surfaces are textured by sand. From the dry creek bed below it, the building looks like some sort of a desert insect, harsh, sharp, and rugged. It felt like it had thin insect-like legs, and it let the tumbleweeds roll by beneath it. From a car, the building looks like a centipede, frozen as it won't be noticed. In a site that is only desert and sky, this building chooses the sky, yet it clings to the desert as if knows that it is where it belongs. I like this description. And here is the building, and I like the building too. Is a large building, but it's interesting. It's unique. Is a manifesto almost. It's horizontal, just like the landscape around it, and it is whitish, although we learn that it's cream. It's nice. It's abstract. It's a little bit a little bit science fiction, but not too much. And I think, and it's also different from the other buildings he did. So obviously, Bart Prince is capable of rejuvenating himself quite convincingly. Too bad I couldn't find the higher resolution of this picture, but it is an interesting building and an interesting house, although a large one indeed. It also seems that the money was not a problem. I mean, the budget. Mr. Fu had the money, so the building advanced towards the horizon. Now we are approaching the end of this presentation. With this also, I couldn't find the best pictures. The Parsifal townhomes in Albuquerque, New Mexico from 2004. Here he has, some row houses, but even these row houses are different from most row houses that we saw or we can see. I don't know what to think about these. I imagine they are garage doors. I don't know. I mean, the largest transparency comes from the garage door. Usually the garage doors are not transparent. Maybe it's an interesting idea. I don't know. I don't find it particularly, uplifting or enlightening, but I mean, you look here is the garage, the garbage cans are outside. Of course, they are always in the proximity of the garage doors, but the garage door here is almost like the storefront window of a museum, but maybe it's interesting to see the cars behind them when there are cars inside. That's it. So I'm not saying happy birthday, Bart Prince, yet because he was born on the 24th, but I thank you for being present today.